Today is the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 astronauts setting foot on the moon. To commemorate this historic event, members of WeCreateEDU, a community of educational YouTubers, have come together to create a playlist of videos on the theme of space. You can find a link to the playlist of space videos down in the description. Now, normally the stuff I make for this channel focuses on science done right here on Earth, but I thought it might be fun to do a thought experiment today. Hopefully you've played the game before where you imagine you're going to be stranded on a desert island and you get to list the 10 things you would choose to bring with you. So if you were going to go live on the moon or Mars, what 10 things would you bring? Well, I know that's a huge ask. After all, a person going to the moon just for a normal mission needs way more than 10 pieces of equipment to survive, to say nothing of potential moon or Mars colonists. So instead, let's use the what 10 things would you bring game to design what I think would be a vital green space for those colonists. We've talked about the concept of biophilia before, and I'm sure it would come into play for people living on the rocky surfaces of the moon or Mars. For this exercise, I'm not proposing the sort of thing that was attempted in the Biosphere 2 experiments. Why not? Well, first of all, because I think they tried to cram too many different kinds of ecosystems inside a relatively small space. Fragmented habitats don't tend to do well, so let's keep it simple for now. Secondly, I don't have the time in this video or the expertise to go into everything that would be required to build and maintain a fully functioning, entirely self-sufficient, closed system to sustain the lives of human colonists. That's an engineering, chemistry, and biology problem, not to mention the social and psychological strain demonstrated by the Biosphere 2 experiments. So what I'm envisioning is a sort of park that would provide space colonists with a comfortable green space to relax, recharge, and reconnect with nature while they're living in a place that's decidedly unlike the one in which our species evolved. Biophilia indicates spending time in green spaces is good for our mental health, so I imagine a park like this could be vital to the long-term success of a colony on the moon or Mars. This would likely be a feature added to a late-stage permanent settlement, but since many things like seeds are small and easy to pack, they could be included relatively early. Since this is a thought experiment, we're starting with a pretty blank slate. First, we have to decide what sort of ecosystem would work best as our park, considering the starting conditions of lunar or Martian soil. It's really dry, rocky, and dusty, so that limits the kinds of vegetation that will readily grow here without severe alterations to the soil. So I immediately thought of an oak savanna ecosystem, because they're well adapted to poor soils and environments with low precipitation. However, they're usually fire regulated, which isn't such a good idea inside an artificial dome on another planet, so we'd probably have to find another way to manage the vegetation. There's also the problem of pollination. Oaks are wind pollinated, but I can't imagine there would be a whole lot of wind inside the artificial dome. So instead, let's pick a tree pollinated by insects. From the North American forests I'm used to, tulip poplars are a good choice with big, beautiful flowers, but maple trees can also be pollinated by insects, and if we picked sugar maples, we could harvest them for syrup as well as enjoying them in our park. For the shorter vegetation in our weird maple savanna, let's pick some plants from the eastern prairies, like little bluestem, fox sedge, and wild white indigo. That gives us a grass, a sedge, and a forb to provide some variation in ground cover. As a bonus, wild white indigo is a legume, meaning it fixes nitrogen into the soil, which is beneficial for all of the surrounding plants. While current surveys of the surface of Mars have found water resources and the atmosphere already has CO2, nitrogen, especially in a form usable by plants, seems to be much rarer. But legumes don't fix nitrogen on their own. They have bacteria that help them. And here's where we get to a tricky bit, because up until now we've been able to name specific species we want to take with us. But when it comes to microorganisms, species is just a social construct, Mom. Yeah, it's a lot more difficult to identify one species because of the way things mix together in the soil and because of the way genetic identification works. So for our purposes, we'll say that we'll bring along some rhizobia bacteria to help fix nitrogen and just leave it at that. That's already half of our 10 things. Okay, what else do we need in our artificial park ecosystem? Well, earlier I mentioned pollinators, so let's throw in some of them. While bats and hummingbirds are super cool pollinators, they're much too highly specialized for what we're working with here. So instead, let's use honeybees. I know, I did a whole video on why European honeybees are problematic, but that was in the context of real ecosystems here on Earth. If we're trying to build a space park, we need a pollinator that's easy to manage and can survive on a wide variety of food sources, so honeybees work well in this situation. Not to mention that we could also harvest honey from them, which is nice. Now for some larger animals. White-tailed deer are pretty hardy and they're browsers, so they could help keep down the population of tree seedlings in our savanna, maintaining the more open vegetation layer. If we're going to have deer, then we could also use a predator/scavenger to keep their population under control. Coyotes are extraordinarily flexible when it comes to where and how they live, so I think they'd be perfect in this situation. But coyotes don't always eat large animals like deer, so let's throw in deer mice as a secondary food source. The deer mice could eat seeds from the plants in our park, so no worries there. Now, you might be thinking that bringing animals to another planet would be incredibly expensive considering their mass. However, if we transported female animals as juveniles, it would reduce their weight for transport, and then we could bring along an array of frozen sperm to artificially inseminate them once they became sexually mature. This would allow us to bring a large amount of genetic diversity with only a small addition of weight. We've only got one more thing left on our list of 10, but there are still some jobs left to be done in our artificial ecosystem. If we dropped sugar maples from the list and turned our park into a grassland rather than a savanna, it would give us a little more wiggle room, but I'm worried it would feel less like a park for colonists on the moon or Mars. But if we did give ourselves that extra wiggle room, we'd be able to bring some decomposers with us. I would definitely choose the rainbow scarab beetle, one of the species in my research project, because the adults eat carrion and the juveniles eat dung. And then we'd also have space to bring one more microorganism for decomposition, but species is just a social construct, Mom. So we'll just keep it vague and say a microbial decomposer. And there we have it! By hypothetically bringing 10 or 11 things with us to our space colony, we've managed to build a park with an ecosystem that would probably kind of function? Yeah, it's pretty bare bones. Ecosystems are complicated, and biodiversity is important to their healthy functioning, but it was really fun to challenge myself to think about how all of the parts in this thought experiment would best fit together. I have 3 other thoughts on bringing things like this to space. Firstly, we usually try to sterilize everything going to other planets to prevent the spread of diseases and parasites, and that would almost definitely be true in the case of our space park. But how are diseases and parasites useful in the ecosystems of our open world here on Earth? Would we potentially need those things in our colony or not? Secondly, though this was a fun thought experiment, I do not actually advocate for us to bring any organisms from Earth to other planets. It's a bad idea because we don't know if we'd be able to control these organisms. Just look at what's happened with countless invasive species here on Earth, from zebra mussels to Japanese beetles to Phragmites grasses. We're better off leaving Earth organisms on Earth. Third and finally, while starting a park in a space colony sounds like a fun idea, what are the implications? I'm worried that we might be looking to the stars as a way to escape the environmental degradation and destruction we've wrought on our own planet. Space might sound like fun, but I'd rather keep my feet here on the ground and try to save the Earth and all of its beautiful, intact ecosystems. So what do you think of the space park I designed with 10 organisms? Would you trade out any of the things I picked? And if so, why? How do you feel about space colonies in general? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. This video was produced as part of a large group collaboration on the theme of space with other members of WeCreateEDU, a group of educational YouTubers. There's a link down in the video description to the entire playlist, and I definitely recommend you go check out the other videos because they're made by some amazing and thoughtful people. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it. If you didn't like this video, please share it with someone who would. And if you'd like to support the Roving Naturalist, remember to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon. Then go check out our Patreon page. You can also follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern, my new project Nature Check will be airing live on Twitch, so please come watch as a bunch of us scientists play Dungeons and Dragons. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.